It's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's begin with the headlines. The main opposition Minju Party takes a stand against a counterterrorism bill it says will give the nation's spy agency the power to conduct surveillance on the public and employs a rarely used filibuster to block its passage, putting Parliament at a standstill yet again. After talks with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says important progress has been made toward the completion of a UN sanction resolution against North Korea. South Korea's household debt hits a record high on the back of an upbeat real estate market, raising concerns about the potential threat to the Korean economy. We begin on the domestic political front. Lawmakers from the main opposition party are continuing with a filibuster launched last night to block a long-stalled counter-terrorism bill. The Minju Party fear it will give the nation's spy agency the power to eavesdrop on citizens. At risk, however, is another bill on Korea's electoral map, whose fate is uncertain ahead of a fast-approaching general election in April. Shin Se-min has our top story.
The filibuster that started at 7 p.m. Tuesday evening is still strong as the clock is heading to its first 24 hours. Representative Kim Kwang-jin of the main opposition Minju Party of Korea began the session by taking the floor. Following up on the list of speakers, Eun Soo-mi, who spoke for 10 hours and 18 minutes, breaking the record set in Korea by the late former President Kim Dae-jung in 1964 and Representative Park Geun-hye in 1969, and even outpacing Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who spoke for 8 hours and 37 minutes while filibustering in the U.S. Congress in 2010. Lawmakers from the minor opposition People's Party and Justice Party have also joined their Minju Party counterparts to continue with the session. The marathon filibuster, rarely seen at the National Assembly, was initiated by the main opposition party to block the passage of a pending counterterrorism bill after Assembly Speaker Cheong Wa Dae moved to call a vote on the legislation. It's the first time a Korean-style filibuster rule has been put into practice since its adoption in 2012. The Minju Party says the bill will give the National Intelligence Service the power to eavesdrop on citizens and conduct surveillance on their private accounts and communications. The ruling Saenuri Party and the president, however, say that the bill will better protect the public and the nation amid the growing threats from North Korea and international terrorism. The bill has brought Parliament to a standstill again, following a weeks-long impasse that saw a recent breakthrough in the form of an agreement on redrawing the country's electoral map. The rival parties had tentatively agreed to vote on the legislation on Friday, but it's anyone's guess as to whether that session will go forward. For now, the Minju Party has vowed to continue its filibuster until the end of the current extraordinary session on March 10th. But it also said it'll do all it can to address the situation, so it'll take some time to see whether the current filibuster will jeopardize the two pending bills or bring about a resolution. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye had some strong words for the country's National Assembly today, pointing at its failure to pass economy-related bills and a counterterrorism bill that's being held up. Park Ji-won fills us in on how the president lambasted lawmakers.
Chairing an economic consultation meeting on Wednesday, President Park Geun-hye had harsh words for lawmakers from the opposition parties and called on them to stop blocking a counterterrorism bill. She said the economy cannot thrive in an unstable society where acts of terrorism could happen at any time.
많은 국민이 희생을 치르고 나서 통과를 시키겠다는 얘기인지 이거는 정말 그 어떤 나라에서도 있을 수 없는 기가 막힌 현상들이라고 생각을 합니다.
President Park Geun-hye also urged the parliament to do its legislative duty before this assembly ends its term in May. She called on lawmakers to pass a package of economy-related bills, including bills on labor reform that her administration has been promoting. She said it is deplorable that all the necessary bills to create jobs, especially for the nation's young people, have been awaiting a vote for so long. She added that making the nation's labor market more flexible would generate new growth momentum and strengthen the economy. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Washington and Beijing inch closer to finishing their adjustments on UN Security Council sanctions against North Korea. The two powers' top diplomats say important progress has been made on measures designed to make Pyongyang pay for its recent nuclear test and long-range missile launch. Kwon So-ah tells us more.
Wrapping up talks in Washington on Tuesday, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry both said significant progress had been made on the adoption of a UN sanctions resolution against North Korea for its latest provocations.
Important progress has been made in the consultations, and we are looking at the possibility of reaching agreement on the draft resolution and passing it in the near future.
There is no question that if the resolution is approved, it will go beyond anything that we have previously passed.
Kerry added that the draft was in the appropriate evaluative stages, indicating it'll be hard to predict when the adoption will come, although there has been word it could happen as early as this week. Kerry and Wang also shared their thoughts on resuming the long-stalled six-party talks, including North Korea, on the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. But the Chinese minister reiterated Beijing's two-track approach to Pyongyang that stresses the importance of dialogue, while also calling for concurrent peace treaty talks. Earlier this week, the U.S. revealed that North Korea had made a proposal recently, but that those talks could only happen if denuclearization remained the top priority. On the planned deployment of a U.S. missile defense system known as THAAD to the Korean peninsula, Kerry said that if we can get to denuclearization, there is no need to deploy THAAD, in a move to reassure Wang that it won't pose any threat to China. Although the Chinese are deeply opposed to the planned deployment, Wang did not offer a direct comment on the issue Tuesday, but did say related countries should refrain from actions that could heighten tension on the Korean peninsula. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Sticking with China's opposition to South Korea's possible defense upgrade, Beijing is ratcheting up its objections to Seoul's planned deployment of THAAD. China's ambassador to South Korea warns the move could destroy South Korea-China relations. But Seoul says it's only exercising its right to defend itself. Han Daeun has the latest on the arguments surrounding the U.S. missile defense system.
The presidential office of Cheong Wa Dae has once again made clear that it'll deploy the THAAD U.S. missile defense system on South Korean soil to protect the nation from North Korea's continual threats, no matter how strongly China objects. Presidential spokesman Chung Yun-guk told reporters Wednesday a THAAD deployment is part of South Korea's arsenal of countermeasures against North Korea's provocations based on its right to defend itself. He added China should be aware of that. His comments came a day after China's ambassador to South Korea, Cheong Wa Dae, lashed out, saying that the THAAD deployment could destroy Korea-China relations, quote, in an instant. Seoul's foreign ministry has asked the Chinese embassy for an explanation. Washington has echoed Seoul's view on self-defense. U.S. Pacific Commander Admiral Harry Harris on Tuesday called China's attempt to wedge itself between Seoul and Washington over a missile defense system designed to defend Americans and Koreans on the peninsula preposterous. He said if China was truly concerned, it would and should intervene with North Korea to convince it to end their cycle of provocations. South Korea and the U.S. are set to start working-level talks soon on the deployment of the controversial missile defense system. Han Daeun, Arirang News.
Tensions between the two Koreas continue to escalate. In the latest cross-border war of words, Seoul has warned Pyongyang to stop its provocations after North Korea said it would target the presidential office with a preemptive strike. Connie Kim files us this report.
South Korea has blasted North Korea for denouncing an upcoming annual round of military drills between Seoul and Washington. The Joint Chiefs of Staff released a statement on Wednesday calling on North Korea to halt all provocations. Seoul also warned it would hold Pyongyang responsible for any situation stemming from its reckless provocations, which it said would expedite the collapse of its dictatorial system. North Korea views the drills as a rehearsal for an invasion, and its condemnation of them is typical. But this time, the North went as far as to target the presidential office of Cheong Wa Dae. In the statement released on Tuesday, the North said it would launch a preemptive strike against any provocations from South Korea or the U.S. and vowed to also target U.S. military bases in the Asia-Pacific and the U.S. mainland. Undeterred, Seoul and Washington are going forward with a tabletop exercise in the U.S. starting Wednesday to bolster their military capability in the wake of North Korea's recent nuclear and long-range missile test. During the annual 3-day discussion-based drill, Seoul and Washington will focus on ways to preemptively strike North Korea if there are signs that Pyongyang is preparing to conduct a nuclear or missile test. The allies will also review the United States' extended deterrence military assets. A high-level defense official also said he could not rule out the possibility of a discussion on a rearrangement of Washington's tactical nuclear weapons. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The financial losses of South Korean companies from the shutdown of the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex is set to stand at an estimated $661 million. This is according to the Emergency Planning Committee of the companies from the park, which calculated losses of 120 firms out of the 124 that used to operate out of Kaesong. And the committee says the damages include $460 million in investment assets and $199 million in inventory. But potential losses that may stem from client complaints have not yet been factored in. South Korean companies have urged the government to roll out more comprehensive compensation measures, saying the payouts offered by the government's Inter-Korean Cooperation Fund would cover a much smaller portion of their losses. President Park Geun-hye enters her 4th year in office on Thursday. To mark the occasion, we are broadcasting a series of reports this week about her successes and failures and look at what might be in store going forward. Here's Kim Hyun-bin with part 3 of 5, focusing on the president's handling of security and defense-related matters.
Since the start of her term in office, President Park has had to handle a continuous stream of threats from North Korea. The most recent being Pyongyang's 4th nuclear test, its firing of a long-range missile, and the planting of landmines in the demilitarized zone that badly injured 2 South Korean soldiers. Some analysts say the president's handling of these tense incidents has left a strong impression.
The Park administration has always responded sternly to North Korea's provocations, diffusing further escalation, even getting close to an apology from the North for last August's mine. But the real test is how her administration will enhance its defense structure for the remainder of her term to better counter the regime's threats, including its nuclear capabilities.
Pyongyang has been enhancing its ballistic missile and nuclear capabilities. In order to combat this growing threat, Seoul decided to address the possibility of deploying the U.S. Terminal High Altitude Area Defense to the peninsula. Prior to the regime's missile testing early this month, the Korean government had been adhering to a so-called no principle on the issue, as in no request, no consultation, no decision.
The government has since backed off its 3-no policy and has instead shifted its focus to put national interest at the forefront. The sudden change garnered controversy. The government should have made it clear from the start that the deployment of THAAD would be decided upon based on national interest.
With an unpredictable neighbor looming just north of the border, there are many issues and tasks President Park needs to address during the remainder of her time in office.
We need to be able to promptly respond to any forms of provocation from the North and adapt our strategy, equipment, and systems. Our military needs to strongly back up the government's North Korea policy and try to change the regime's views while strongly countering any threats.
Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Time after time, snowballing debt has been cited as a potential threat to the Korean economy. With fresh figures out from last quarter, those concerns may further weigh down the government as the total sum has yet again hit a record high. For the numbers and more, we turn to Hwang Ji-hye.
The Bank of Korea says household debt, which includes sales on credit, hit a record high of 1,200 trillion won. That's around $1 trillion as of the end of last year. This is the largest amount logged since 2002 when related data were first compiled. It's also up roughly $100 billion from a year ago, marking the fastest pace of growth on record. The rise was led by the growth of household loans, including mortgages, on the back of an upbeat real estate market. The growth of sales on credit that shot up in the third quarter last year due to measures to jumpstart spending, leading to high credit card bills, this time slowed down slightly. The household debt problem is cited as a potential risk by many economists, with growing fears about the property market losing steam in the next 2 to 3 years. But they also add that it's already a burden to the economy as it's stacked up with longer-term issues like the aging population.
People are choosing to save instead of spend, facing uncertain economic conditions. And they also want to prepare for post-retirement. This kind of tendency won't change easily.
The rise in household debt in the fourth quarter actually also has to do with government measures to clamp down on debt. Ahead of tighter guidelines when screening applicants for loans that kicked in this month, more people who are looking to borrow turned to banks before those measures went into force. So now, with policymakers unleashing fresh efforts to tackle swelling debt levels, eyes are focused on whether those numbers start showing some changes in the first quarter of this year. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
After 2 straight years of decline, the number of newborn babies in Korea picked up in 2015 compared to the year before. Figures from Statistics Korea on Wednesday show that more than 438,000 babies were born last year. That's 3,300 or slightly under 1% more compared to the year earlier. The fertility rate also saw an increase, with the average Korean woman expected to have 1.24 children during her lifetime, up 2.4%. Despite this uptick, Korea still has one of the lowest birth rates in the world, well under the OECD average of 1.67 as of 2013. And that's all the time we have for this hour's newscast. And as always, thank you for watching.